Welcome back into another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. We are your co-hosts. That is RJ Schafer. I'm Jackson Caudell, coming to you Wednesday afternoon, like we promised. I know sometimes we don't always keep our promises because of our schedules, but we did say we were going to give you a Wednesday episode. We're here to talk more in depth about the transfer portal, specifically as it relates to Georgia Tech, maybe just kind of looking at the roster as it stands right now. Hopefully this doesn't get outdated by the time you guys listen to it. But RJ, how you doing, man?
Feeling as good as I can for losing a star receiver in the portal. But this is Christmas season, college football, a lot of exciting things happening in the transfer portal. So,
yeah, that's the thing with the way the calendar's set up. It's like, you don't have time for the holidays. Like, it's not like as soon as the regular season ends, like you're off for a while. Now the transfer portal's open. You've got bowl games coming. We've got a big 12-team playoff. Like we have playoff games next Saturday. I know Georgia Tech specifically doesn't. But, we're going to have playoff games to watch starting next weekend, and that's going to be exciting. What we're going to do in today's episode is just kind of go look at the roster position by position and kind of give our thoughts like, hey, would some additions make sense here? What could happen here? And, again, I hope this doesn't get outdated by the time it's published and it's out there, like, if whether players enter or I don't think there's going to be any commitment yet because you're kind of just seeing some visits start to trickle in for this weekend and such, but we're just going to kind of give an overall roster preview, I guess roster look at. I shouldn't say preview. It sounds like we're playing a game tomorrow or something. And kind of talk some more in depth about the guys who left. I know we kind of just mentioned it in passing on Monday's episode when we were talking about Eric Singleton and Tacey more specifically, but we'll kind of get into the other guys as well and kind of talk about what the impact of that is going to be. But of course, before we really get in depth, guys, of course, we would really appreciate it if you guys would subscribe to the channel and like the video, hit that notification bell so you know when new content is live. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review. We love seeing you guys' reviews, even if it's bad. We want to make the show as good as we can for you guys because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So anything we can do to improve, just be sure to let us know. And like I said, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, but we appreciate those ones that have subscribed and tune in every episode. All right, you ready to get into it?
yes, sir.
All right, so I'm just going to keep it short and simple with the quarterback position. Like we're going to start off with it, but it's just going to be barring something unforeseen and shocking. I don't think quarterback is really worth talking about. Do you?
Not really. I mean, Philo
Haynes
pretty much introduced himself as the backup.
Yeah,
Haynes
like going into next year again, unless there's something surprising. I anticipate Haynes King. You have Aaron Philo. You still have Graham Knowles, who was a freshman last year, redshirted, didn't play in any games. Grady Adamson he's not going to be an early enrollee, but he's going to be there in the summer as your depth QB. So you're pretty much set at that position with Pyron leaving, 5 quarterbacks was going to be a lot. Like somebody was almost always going to leave, and it's been Pyron. Again, Pyron did a lot. Like, we talked about him a little bit on Monday and hope nothing for the best for him. And I'm excited to see where he lands up. And hopefully he can have a successful finish to his college career. But as far as quarterback goes, unless something just we don't think is going to happens, I don't think it's really worth talking about. You? Not
really. Great depth, great starter. That's about it.
Yeah, like this is where you want to be. Like this is pretty much where you want to be as far as quarterback goes. You have a young stud looking to take over at some point. Haynes King still on the roster. Just we saw how much he meant to the team, and what the impact he has, especially in the Georgia game. Like you're very well set up there. Like that hasn't changed at all. So that's a very good spot to be in. Let's go to running back, where I do think it is interesting because you have one departure, and not due to transfer, but just due to being out of eligibility. Like Trey Cooley was a senior, had some trouble with injury this year, staying healthy. He literally got hurt on the opening kickoff of the Florida State game and just kind of had to battle his way back from that point. But you still have Jamal Haynes. You have Anthony Carey will be going into his sophomore year. You have Chad Alexander, Traylon Maddox, Daylon Gordon. And you're also bringing in J.P. Powell and Shane Marshall. Now, Powell is an early enrollee while Marshall is not. So that'll be an interesting dynamic working there. I know they've offered and set up a visit with Penn transfer Malachi Hosley, who was a very good freshman at at Penn and had some yards there. I wrote about it at Georgia Tech on SI. Go check it out. I wrote about the visit. Now, this to me is a position, and I don't want to keep repeating myself, so I'll just kind of give a blanket statement here. Barring anything unforeseen or surprising whenever we're talking about these things. Like this is I'm not factoring in a potential just shocking transfer, who knows, NFL decision or something like that, because those things can always happen again. Hopefully we're not caught off guard by the time you guys are hearing this, but just kind of put that out there. When I'm talking, this is all barring just something completely unexpected. But when I look at running back position, I always think it's almost always smart to add depth, because as we've seen, injuries happen all the time at the running back spot. Jamal Haynes was banged up a little bit this year. Trelane Maddox was a little bit banged up this year. So we had Chad Alexander miss some time as well. Trey Cooley, who we talked about again. Like, you had some guys just getting nicked here and there. And so having, if you brought in a Malachi Hosley to come in and be a compliment to Jamal Haynes, while still hoping you get a next step from Anthony Carey, Chad Alexander, and those young guys, I think that would be great. I wouldn't anticipate, I don't think, more than one addition. Just as far as roster goes, I don't think it'd make much sense to bring in multiple backs, especially with the freshmen coming in. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they are not an equally as good position at running back as you are at quarterback, but you're pretty dang close. You're bringing in two, honestly, really good freshmen at running back. J.P. Powell, I think, could fight for playing time. I mean, the only thing is you just have so many running backs who have played a lot. Like Chad Alexander almost moved into that backup role. He was a walk-on. I don't think a lot of people would have expected him to, be in that role.
He did really well, too.
And he was amazing. Trey Cooley, Anthony Carey, and then Trelane Maddox is, obviously returning from injury. So I think you have a lot of guys that can play. It's too early to see how that's going to shape out. But I do like the depth. I could see one player in the portal, but like you said, I don't think there's any reason to get two players.
Yeah, and I would go for a proven player too. Like, I wouldn't do anything based off potential or anything, because that's what you basically have with your young guys. You're hoping those guys take the next step. I would take somebody that's proven. Again, like we talked about Hosley, I don't have a comprehensive list of running backs in the portal. I don't think there's been this 5-star stud get in the portal who you would just really go after. But there's some guys that can be depth pieces and can be change of pace guys as well. And look, we know run the ball. Like, that's what Brent Key loves to do. So I wouldn't be shocked if they add at least one player here. I don't expect multiple, just given the way the rosters shake out. And again, barring anything that hasn't happened yet. So I was almost said, are you ready to move to fullback? But
yeah, I don't know how much there is to talk about there.
Yeah. So I guess we need to talk about receiver, because that is, for anybody that hasn't heard or lives under a rock, that is a position Georgia Tech is going to need to go after. Eric Singleton got in the portal Monday. Again, I'll also mention again, so I don't have to repeat myself, players that are in the portal can always come back. It doesn't mean they will, but you're not barred from coming back if you do go in. Just a reminder, Trinelius Tatum, he hit the portal last year, came back, was an impact player as well. So you can come back if you hit the portal. But just kind of looking receiver-wise right now, Singleton transferred, Leo Blackburn transferred, Chase Lane is going to be out of eligibility, Abdul Janae is going to be out of eligibility. And then you're left with a lot of mostly young and unproven guys. Like right now, Malik Rutherford is slated to be back. You have Isaiah Canyon, Zion Taylor, Trey Horn, Bailey Stockton. And then you got the guys coming in as well, like Jamari Bryce, Cal Faulkner, Jordan Allen, the speedster. Like those players who I really do think have a bright future, but are they going to be ready to play day one? I don't know. This is a position I would expect Georgia Tech to go pretty hard after, just to be perfectly honest. Like, I would be shocked if they didn't try to add a few guys out of here. Like, I know it was reported, I think it was On 3 Sports was reporting that they were trying to get a visit lined up with LSU transfer CJ Daniels, who I think that would be really good. He was a stud at Liberty. He wasn't terrible at LSU. I know he didn't catch a touchdown, but I don't know if he just wasn't a fit there or whatnot. I know he was highly coveted in the portal last year, but I know they had I think it was On 3 Sports reported that they were trying to get him in for a visit. They have sent other offers out to receivers, so it is clearly a position I think they're going to look at. It's a position they should. Like, I like the young guys. I think they can be good players. But it's also like I think, going into next year, I think you're going to want some proven guys there as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot on the table at wide receiver, more than probably any other position. Like if you look at On3's transfer portal rankings, 9 out of the top 18 players in those rankings are wide receivers. Obviously, that's including Eric Singleton. But there are so many guys on that list, like Jonte Cook, the transfer from Texas, Eric Rivers, C.J. Daniels. I think would be a Hall of Fame guy to get. Obviously, came from Georgia, Parkview High School. There are a lot of players that you could get, and I think you're going to have to get multiple at wide receiver because, I mean, receiver is a position you just don't want to rush 2 freshmen in.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, not everybody is an Eric Singleton type talent. Like, he got on the field as a true freshman. And we saw some of the, like Isaiah Canyon really stepped up as the year went on. Like, he had that big catch in the Georgia game when they were backed up on the goal line. He had like a 30-yard catch, I believe. So maybe he can take a next step. We didn't see any of Trey Horn this past year. Haven't seen much of Zion Taylor in the first couple of years, but he is a guy I really loved when he was coming out of high school. I thought he could be a player down the line. And, that's going to be something we'll see as the spring goes on, and we'll get into that. But there's some other guys like I know I've seen get Georgia Tech offers. DT Sheffield out of North Texas is a guy I know has an offer. Harvey Broussard out of Louisiana is a guy I know has a Georgia Tech offer. So there's some different guys out there, some different body types, and some different players of that nature. So I do expect receiver to be a priority position for Georgia Tech. Just again, given the guys that they've lost, given the guys that they have coming back, you're going to need some proven production in there. And if you add those guys and those guys still take a step forward, all the better. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're going to look for a lot of different type of players. Like I don't think wide receivers a position where you only bring in one transfer. I think if you bring in a guy, there's going to be somebody alongside him as well.
No, I agree. So going to tight end, this is again a position where you are losing multiple players. Avery Boyd is a senior. Jackson Halls is a senior. Rylan Goday is a senior. But you are returning some players that did play this year. Like Josh Beetham will be back. Luke Harpering will be back. Now, a name that maybe most don't know or have forgotten, Jackson Long, who had come in as a transfer a couple of years ago from South Florida. He didn't play last year, tore his ACL. I believe it was in the spring. It was before the season. He didn't play this year. Like, he will be back healthy. You signed 2 freshman tight ends. You have David Prince on the roster. He was a freshman tight end this past year, didn't play at all. Now, that's a position we know Georgia Tech uses a lot of tight ends. Obviously, whether it's blocking, like Jackson Halls was a monster blocker. I mean, it's what got him into the Senior Bowl. And I think Mel Kiper had him rated as one of the 6 or 7 best tight ends in the entire draft, and it's mostly because of blocking. Like, that dude's just a stud. Losing Avery Boyd, you kind of losing like your athletic receiver piece. And then Goday, he kind of was a little bit of a mixture of both. Like, he did catch some passes, but he was also very good at blocking. You are returning some guys that played this year. Like, Harpering was a highly rated recruit. Josh Beetham made some plays this past year. You are bringing in a couple of freshman tight ends as well. So kind of what is your outlook when looking at this position right now? It's a little bit like receiver that I expect maybe at least one to come in and maybe find somebody just solely to be a blocking tight end to take Jackson Hall's place. Now, the tight end market can be a little scarce when you talk about the transfer portal, but they've done it over the past few years. They brought in several guys, and I kind of do look for them to possibly bring in at least one.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you look at the guys that were on the roster, a lot of them were transfers. Like Jackson Hawes was a transfer, Rylan Goday was a transfer, Josh Beetham, Brett Seither, Jackson Long, all guys who were on the roster last year. I wouldn't expect, like wide receiver, I don't know if I would expect multiple tight ends, but I would definitely expect to get a guy that serves that blocking role because Goday and Hawes were probably your 2 best blockers of the tight end position last year, and they both so happen to be out of eligibility. So I'd look for a guy that's primarily a blocking tight end. I, I don't know if it would be a guy that's necessarily as proven as you'd be looking for at receiver. I think you could get a guy that, maybe is more of a developmental piece. But that position to me is probably the most, you know, in the lengths kind of uncertain compared to others.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they attack it. Just again,
Yeah.
they use multiple tight ends. Injuries happen, of course. So I'll be interested to see kind of what they do there. But I would anticipate at least one coming in. Anything else on tight ends?
Nope.
All right, let's move on to the next position on offense. Offensive line. Look, we talked about Corey Robinson entering the portal. You are also losing Weston Franklin to graduation. Jordan Williams is out of eligibility. Jordan Brown is also transferring out. So this is a position I think is kind of interesting. And I've seen a couple of offers go out there. To me, my take on it, and this is just purely from me, I feel like you're taking a guy if he a proven guy. Like I don't think you're going to be taking any young players who are unproven because that's kind of what you have on the roster. Like they've really hit the offensive line recruiting hard recently. Um, and trying to develop guys. Look, we talked about it mostly like this offensive line class, like with Demola going to South Carolina, like I probably wouldn't say it's the best offensive line class in the country, but you still have Josh Petty, you still have Peyton Joseph, you have Kevin P. and those guys. It's still a very good offensive line class. And then last year with you had Jamison Riggs, they've really hit it hard over the past few years. So for me, I think this is a position where they could bring some guys in. Look, you could look at a center. Tana, I know they really like him, and he did play some. Like he was a direct backup to
Yep.
Weston Franklin. Now, a redshirt freshman center like that, there are challenges, but like center is an incredibly important position on offense. Like I know every position is important, and I might be being Captain Obvious here, but at center is a very important position, and maybe they don't think he's ready. There are some guys out there that are, you know, as centers that are proven, like Braylon Moore at Virginia Tech. Me and you were talking about him. I forget the kid's name. Apologies, but UAB had a, a very experienced transfer enter. He was one of the highest graded in PFF. Look, we've seen some centers enter the transfer portal, so that's position. Right tackle is also, when me and you were talking before the show, like you look at it next year, again, barring anything surprising, Joe Fusal is back at left guard. Keelan Rutledge, who was first team All ACC, is back at right guard. Ethan McKinney, who played a lot as a freshman, didn't play as much this year, but he did share some snaps with Corey Robinson at left tackle later in the year. I'm kind of just presuming he takes over at left tackle. Maybe that's dumb of me to do, but I do think that is probably the plan at least. So I think center and right tackle are your spots where you're going to have a guy possibly come in. Now I haven't seen any center offers, to be perfectly honest. I know they offered the offensive tackle out of Cal Poly, who again name's escaping me right now. I don't have it in front of me. Received a very high pass blocking grade. I could, he's an experienced player, gives the younger guys some time to develop. What are your thoughts on the offensive line going in? And I should note that some of the guys are early enrollees, like Josh Petty, the 5-star offensive tackle. He is an early enrollee. I'm very interested to see where he ends up. Kevin P. is also an early enrollee. And Xavier Canales are early enrollees, but Peyton Joseph is not, and neither is Jimmy Bryson. So you have 3 of your 5 offensive line takes in the 2025 class as early enrollees. But kind of what are your thoughts on it right now as the portal's open?
Yeah, Josh Petty is the player that's most interesting to me because I have no clue what they're going to do with him. I'd imagine he'd be on the 2 deep in his first year, but I also think it's possible that he could be he could be rotating it for minutes early.
The 5-star player is interesting to you?
Shocker, big shocker on that one. But I think for true freshmen offensive linemen, they don't really play that much at the collegiate level. I think Petty could be that. Am I saying he's going to start at right tackle this year and be the centerpiece of the offensive line? Probably not. Do I think he could work into that in the season? Yes. But I think offensive line is a position that Brent Key has hit so hard in his time at Georgia Tech. There's so much depth, honestly, on the offensive line. The center position, you could get a guy there. But maybe you look for a tackle. Maybe you get one guard. But I don't know if you're going to get a ton of players in the transfer portal from the offensive line.
Yeah.
If you're getting a
Brady,
guy, he's going to start.
yeah. Brady Norton is the player from Cal Poly, so apologies for not having his name first round. But you have some guys, again, you've recruited and developed over the past couple of years that I think you're kind of – it might be, I could see this being a spring transfer portal position possibly. Because I think what could happen is you go through spring practice, see where some of these guys are at, and see what you need to address. But going in, hey, right now, Weston Franklin's leaving, Jordan Williams is leaving. Like, you have those two guys gone. That could be positions where you, again, plug and play stars. Like, again, I think Georgia Tech's at least in the position for most positions around where you're willing to take somebody proven instead of just potential. Like, at least that's how it comes off to me. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, we saw that last year. That's what they did last year, and I think they're in a similar position. Keelan Rutledge is, first team All ACC, and he was first team All Conference before he was at Georgia Tech. So I think they're looking for guys that they don't have to play at a Power 5 program, but you have to show that you can play.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so some of the younger offensive linemen just on the roster, that I'm kind of like, we'll be watching in the spring. Like, this will be one of the prime spring football positions, like a guy like a Jordan Floyd, or Kai Greer, Benjamin Galloway, Patrick Screws, Jamison Riggs, those kind of guys. Brandon Best has been on the roster for a little bit. Harrison Moore was a guy. They kind of used him in a unique way. Like, he was kind of, when they really went heavy with their personnel and wanted to run the ball, like, he came in and was kind of a extra tight end basically, but he also played a little. He was in at left tackle and left guard. He is a guy I'm very interested to see. Like, I know they're very high on. So I'll be interested to see how he turns out and if he's ready for more playing time, because that could honestly be the case. Like, again, maybe he's at right tackle, maybe he's at center, maybe he's just a depth guy and you can continue to get some experience. But this will be one of the positions I'll be really paying attention to in the spring, because, again, we do have a spring window now. It is not open for very long. I know the December window closes December 28th. So, again, this one's really not open all that long in the grand scheme of things. That's why you're seeing visits being set up so quickly. But offensive line, for me, is a position I'm going to be watching pretty closely in the spring. Any thoughts on offense before we move to defense? Yeah, like, to me, I would say that if I had to rank all 5 positions in terms of the likeliness of where they could add guys, like, to me, number 1 is receiver. Personally, I think number 2 is running back. I just feel like the tight end is just – I think running back and tight end are almost tied with me, because I don't think you're going to add a ton there, and I think you're going to be very specific about who you add. Like, I don't think it's just we need to go get a running back or we need to go get a tight end, send an offer out to every player in the portal. But I do think you could get some guys specific there. I think it's almost tied with me there. Offensive line would be 4th. Again, we've seen some offers go out to some players with some experience. I think, again, you're looking for that. And then, again, barring something shocking, like, quarterback is dead last. And that's not going to change, I don't think.
See, I would rank it a little bit differently. I just don't see, with the returning production you have at running back, I wouldn't be shocked to see them not go after a ton of guys and not get anybody. I would put tight ends. I would go wide receiver number 1. I would go tight ends 2. I would honestly put offensive line 3, then running back, then wide, and then quarterback.
Okay. Well, that's why this show exists, doesn't it? So let's go to the defensive line. Now, this was a position that Georgia Tech went really heavy at last offseason. Look, and some guys that really made some impact. Romello Height was monstrous. Jordan Vandenberg was huge. Thomas Gore was a very serviceable rotation player, kind of what me and you projected him to be. Zeke Biggers was Zeke. Like, he was pretty reliable. He did a great job on special teams this year as well. Like, he blocked more than one kick, I know. But you're also going to have some attrition here. Now, you did lose Horace Lockett to the transfer portal. He was a little banged up this year. He never really got on the field during his time at Georgia Tech. I think he's a talented player. I wish him nothing but the best, and I'll be interested to see where he ends up. But kind of going through here, you are losing some seniors. Micaiah Scott is gone. Romello Height can be back for another year. Kevin Harris is gone. Horace Lockett hit the portal. Josh Robinson was a senior. Sylvain was a senior. Thomas Gore was a senior. Zeke was a senior. You have some young guys. And we also saw Uchi Elo. He hit the portal yesterday. Again, if I pronounced your name wrong, I apologize. He was a prospect I really liked coming out of the 2024 class. Didn't really find a way on the field at all this year. I'll be interested to see where he ends up. Wish him nothing but the best. But he did hit the portal yesterday. You still have eligibility from guys like Jason Moore, Shy McJones, Landon Marshall, who was a freshman, Amontre Bradford, who was a guy I'm very excited about as a freshman. But as of right now, this is a position I do think is going to be looked at in the transfer portal, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, you lost so much depth at the D-tackle position. I'd say, honestly, this is probably one of the biggest places of need defensively and on the team. I wouldn't be shocked if they add 2 to 3 guys in a mix of a proven guy and a developmental guy, just because, I mean, you lost starters, you lost rotational guys. You lost people all around the 2 deep. So I would expect a lot of action at defensive line.
Yeah, and it's a position that was much improved, especially when it came to run defense. But again, the pass rush was a little lacking. And if you're getting another season out of Romello Height like that, that is huge. But you're going to have some other guys step up. And now you are getting some guys, some guys I know me and you both like in this recruiting class. Like Christian Garrett is a name. I think he is going to have a path to playing time right away. He is an early enrollee as well, which is huge. And that's one thing. I'm sure it might seem like I'm making an obvious point, but every spring I ask nearly every position coach when they come to talk to us in the spring, how important are early enrollees and how important is it to get in here and get going? And they all tell me like the exact same thing. It is just so huge nowadays to get in here, start learning right away, learning the scheme, learning the players around you and just what to do. Like that is just so important. I think it's starting to get a little bit overlooked. I think maybe just with how many players are transferring in and out nowadays and just, you're not at one place for forever, or a lot of guys aren't, but that cannot be overstated, how getting in here early and being able to hit the ground running. And like that Christian Garrett's a guy I'm looking for to possibly do that. Darian Norris is a guy I'm very excited about with his future. He is also an early enrollee. And again, it is tough for true freshmen to play. Like, don't at all get me wrong. But like both of those guys are guys I could see making an impact. Carrington Coombs is an edge player. He is not an early enrollee, like his talent. Again, true freshman who is not an early enrollee is going to have a tough path. Andre Fuller, I talked about it, with Najee. He is one of my, if not my favorite player in the class. He is an early enrollee, and I could see him finding a way to make an impact on the field. So you're going to have him in there. But, just most certainly I think you're going to see some guys. Blake Beelan is another one. Very excited to see him. He is also an early enrollee. So you have some young guys coming in, but I do think it would be a good idea to bring in maybe 2, maybe even 3 veteran level players to kind of even some things out.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see it from teams, that have a very big distinction on pass rush. Like pass rush is very important. Not that the pass rush was horrible, but it definitely
it did get better as the year went on. I'll say that. Because early on,
there is a lot to.
Yeah, early on it was bad. You can go. I don't recommend going back to watch the Syracuse game, but if you are so inclined to do like that was an example of the pass rush being like nowhere near. The Louisville game was very bad, but then you saw again as the year went on, like it was pretty solid against Miami. I think I would argue some of that might be Cam Ward just holding the ball so long, but again, credit where it's due. They did get, I think, 3 or 4 sacks in that game. They got better as the year went on, but it's not where you want to be if you're wanting to compete at the top of the ACC. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you need 2 superstars, and I think you have one in Romello Height. I think you got to look for another.
Yeah, this would be a position I would think they had multiple guys, but moving to linebacker right now, you have one departure, and that's Trinilius Tatum. And, he was, again, a guy, went to the portal last year, came back, and he started making plays down the stretch. Like, he had a really big game against NC State that I think got a little overlooked. Like, he was a really good player there in that game. But EJ Lightsey is back, and he was a guy that was banged up at the start of the year. He really didn't get a lot of playing time until later on. Now with a full season under his belt, I'm interested to see what he can do next year. Tajay Butler was a true freshman. Again, he took some lumps this year. There were some missed tackles here and there, but for a true freshman playing in the ACC, like I really thought he did well handling himself. He adjusted pretty well. He had some nice tackles for loss in various games. He's a player I'm pretty excited about. A little bit in the same vein as Tay Seymour. Like, again, it wasn't perfect, but you were excited about maybe what was to come. And again, Tay hit the portal, but I'm excited to see what Tajay Butler can do next year. Jackson Hamilton is back. He started getting playing time as the year went on. Kyle Eford, again, saving the best for last year. Kyle Eford can be back for another season. So you have some veterans here. They've clearly sent some offers out in the portal. I think this is linebackers a little bit like running back in the sense is you have some guys here, but guys have been banged up a lot. Like we saw Eford get banged up this year. I just talked about Lightsey getting banged up this year. You're losing Trinilius Tatum. So getting some more proven guys for depth would not be such a bad thing. And then even if they're starter level players, like getting more talent at linebacker, this is something I could see Georgia Tech doing. I don't think you don't need to land as much as you do with defensive line. Like that is an urgent position to me. But adding more depth at linebacker and possibly starter level players is something I think they would look into.
Yeah, I agree. I think you do have pretty much, a starting roster at linebacker, but I'd look for an insurance guy, kind of like you said, a guy who can come in, a guy who doesn't really have injury history. And granted, injuries are unpredictable. A guy could have no injuries in his entire football career and have an injury in his senior season, but I would. I don't think this is a position where Georgia Tech's going to hit really hard, but I wouldn't complain getting one portal ad, in the winter portal.
No, and maybe it's two, but yeah, it's just kind of like we said, the injuries are unpredictable. We saw what happened this year. We saw how important Eford was to the lineup. We didn't get to see Lightsey early in the season. You're losing Tatum, and also a note like they didn't take a running back or not a running back, a linebacker in this class. We asked Brent Key about that during his signing day press conference, and he basically said it's kind of just the way things shook out with the numbers they had, the guys they went after. I know they went after some guys, but I don't think the linebacker board was very big. So that was that was the only position they didn't take any of. So I think you're looking at some veteran guys in the portal to kind of supplement that. But any other linebacker thoughts?
Nope.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up with DB, or we'll move on to special teams here. And this to me is an interesting position. So just kind of again running down the roster, LaMiles Brooks is a senior. He is gone. Warren Burrell, the corner, who was very good this year as a transfer take, he is a senior. He is gone. Tay Seymour has hit the portal. And that's kind of where you stand right now. So you have Amari Harvey can come back for another season. Clayton Powell can come back for another season. Rodney Shelley can come back for another season. Saeed Gibbs can come back for another season, as can Omar Daniels, Zachary Toby as well. He was a guy that, was forced into action in the Georgia game. There was a lot of DB injuries in that Georgia game, of course. But you are losing some veteran players, but you are bringing enough back. Like right now, as far as corners go, like Burrell's the only guy you're really missing. Like Harvey can be back, Shelley can be back. Now all these guys need to elevate their play. But again, we've seen some offers go out to some veteran DBs, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they made some additions here.
Yeah, and this is a position I wouldn't be shocked if you add multiple guys. So similar to defensive line, a mix of starters, because I think you do probably need one more starter level player that is proven, that has played, a lot at the next level in the transfer portal. But I wouldn't be shocked if you add a few guys at safety depth, because we saw last year injuries can kill your safety room, and that's a very important position in the secondary. So I think there's a lot they can do. I would add at least one starter and then a couple of extra guys in the safety room and maybe one cornerback just to give yourself some insurance.
Yep. And then just talking about the freshmen coming in, look, we've talked a lot about Tay Harris. He is an early enrollee. He is a guy I could see playing very early and very often. Dalen Pinson is not. He runs track also, so he is not going to be an early enrollee. But also Jaden Barr, he will be an early enrollee in the DB room. Just kind of looking through the rest of them right here. Elgin Sessions, he is another early enrollee. We've seen some guys play some spots younger. I mean, like go back a couple years ago, like Clayton Powell was playing as a freshman. Tay Seymour played as a redshirt freshman this year. You have some guys in there. Look, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's a guy I think you add some veterans to see where the young guys are at, because there are some young guys in the DB room that I'm excited to see, in the spring what they can do. Like Troy Stevenson, who was a 4-star corner, last year. Nehemiah Chandler is a guy I'm kind of excited to see. Christian Pritchett, DJ Moore, who everybody knows as a receiver, got hurt in the preseason, was not able to kind of provide depth right there. He'll be back for another season. I hope he can stay healthy. I'm excited to see what he can do. And then, Jaden Davis, Cedric Franklin, Nico Dowdle, and those guys. I'm excited to see kind of this is almost like offensive line. Like I'm going to be watching it closely in the spring to kind of see where some guys are at, and then maybe you add some more additions. But I do anticipate Georgia Tech at least making an effort to add some guys to the defensive back room in the portal.
Yeah, would you say this is the biggest place of need on defense for Georgia Tech?
No. To me, it's defensive line. You're just losing so many guys there for whether it's depth or whatnot. Again, like we talked about, like Zeke, Josh Robinson, Kevin Harris, Sylvain, Thomas Gore. You're just losing a lot right there. Like here right now, you've lost LaMiles, Tay Seymour, and Warren Burrell. And look, Warren Burrell to me is an underrated loss. He was a very good cover corner this year for Georgia Tech. I know pass defense wasn't always the strongest, but I thought he had a really good season. But you still have Harvey and Shelley, and you have some young guys you're hoping can step up and be better depth pieces. So I would just say I just think you're losing more on the defensive line, and you have some more holes there. But you also have some talented guys like Montre Bradford and some of those guys as well. But I expect them to add players at every level of the defense.
Yeah, I think so too. I wouldn't be shocked if Georgia Tech, just due to the amount of roster spots they have, add somebody from every single position besides quarterback.
That's what I was going to say. There's only one position we talked about where we're like, there's not going to be any transfer portal additions here.
Yeah, and on special teams, I would say the same thing. Yeah, and I think I don't know if you would add a kicker, but I feel like you could.
It would have, again, I know Aiden Burr had his struggles this year, but again, it has to be a proven guy. Like you can't take somebody with the potential of hoping he's good, or you take a guy who may have had some good years in the past but was shaky this past year. And to be honest, I don't know the kicker market right now. I haven't seen a ton of kickers enter the transfer portal, but you are going to need a new punter with David Shanahan being out of eligibility. So that is something I would look for. I do believe they offered the Kennesaw State punter. Their head coach left. They did offer him. I'll try to check in on that situation. I know it's not the thing everybody's like most in tune to is, what's up with the kickers. But, as we saw, special teams were costly in games this year. You missed some field goals in a 3-point loss against Syracuse. You had some misses and a blocked field goal returned for a touchdown against Louisville. You had a very short miss against Georgia. Like there were some misses this year that turned out to be hurtful in losses. So that position is going to be evaluated as well, and we'll kind of see what transpires there. But just kind of, as an overlook, I think I like where Georgia Tech's roster is at. And again, there's no sugarcoating the loss of Eric Singleton. Like we talked about it, it is a big loss. Like he's a very talented player. Like there's a reason schools like Georgia and Ole Miss and Auburn and Miami are, vying for him. And he's one of the highest rated portal players in the portal, whatever sites you look at, 247 on 3, anywhere you look, like he's one of the most highest rated players. But if he is your only highly regarded player to enter the portal, like I do think you can manage that. Like that is something you can work around. And as we've seen up to this point, again, I hope this does not age poorly. I like the roster that is being put in place for 2025. Again, like we'll see what things look like at the end of the portal. We're going to be covering this stuff extensively over the next couple of weeks and kind of looking where things stand. But it's not something you can't overcome. again, he's not irreplaceable, and you have some talent there, but it's a loss. Like, I don't want to get into the whole thing again, but it is a loss. But right now, to me, he is the only really huge loss you've had where it's like, okay, that leaves us in a bit of a tight jam at the position. But the good thing is you have some weeks to get some guys in there and improve.
Well, and Brett Key's shown that he can bring in big-time transfers, big-time recruits, and I think Georgia Tech has the money right now to, maybe get one of those really big transfer portal recruits that could offset that loss. But Pete Nakos, while we were doing this, he did report that FIU transfer Dean Patterson, wide receiver, has lined up a visit to Georgia Tech. He was, I believe, FIU's leading receiver last year, 685 yards, 9 touchdowns.
I think they had a 1,000-yard receiver. I don't mean to sound like a know-it-all there, but I think Eric Rivers, he was a leading receiver for them last year. Fact checking you live on your show.
he could be a big impact guy though, so I'm not down.
I didn't mean to come off like he wasn't good. I was just more saying like, well, I do think like because the FIU's had a ton of guys enter the portal, and they had some good receivers actually last year, so that'll be worth checking into. But again, there's going to be several visits lined up. Receiver, defensive line, secondary, the positions I really expect them to go hard after. You could add some offensive linemen or linebackers in there as well, but those are kind of the 3 positions that stand out to me. And look, a talented player at any position would be welcome, especially if it's a highly rated player, probably except quarterback. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think any talent is good talent. Even if you already have guys in the roster, you're never going to say no.
Yeah, never going to say no. So before we get out of here, just the usual stuff, guys. If you haven't already, just be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit that notification bell so you know whenever our new content is live. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. We really love the reviews and the support you guys have given us. We read every one of them, whether it's 1 or 5 stars. We really appreciate the support and love trying to learn what we can do better to improve the show for you guys. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you next time.